and no one moves a limb, a muscle, when Camilla passes. And that was because they were angry with...
Whispers had curled through the royal corridors long before the world ever heard a word. Yet nothing could have prepared anyone for the moment when King Charles finally broke his silence, uttering the chilling phrase, "I hated her." Those 3 words, sharp as shattered glass, instantly ignited a storm across Britain and beyond. Advisors froze, family members reportedly exchanged stunned glances, and the public scrambled to understand who he meant and why he had spoken now. What buried story, long concealed beneath decades of royal secrecy, had pushed the king to reveal such explosive truth? The words slipped into the air with an unexpected weight, heavy enough to still the breath of all who heard them. In a room where restraint had always been the unspoken rule, and every gesture of the monarch was carefully measured, the trembling voice of King Charles III shattered the stillness. It was not the polished tone the public had come to expect from countless speeches and ceremonial appearances. It was something raw, an unfiltered crack in the armor of a man trained more for silence than for sincerity. From that fractured moment came a sentence that would ripple far beyond the palace walls. He said he had hated her. It was a confession that arrived not with fanfare or the dramatic flourish of a public address, but quietly, almost reluctantly, as if truth were slipping free from years of meticulously maintained control. Once spoken, however, it could not be retracted, and its impact lingered, forcing the pressing question. Why would a king choose to reveal such a private, unsettling emotion after decades of careful composure? Why now, after a lifetime spent shielding personal feelings behind royal duty and tradition? For much of his life, Charles had been caught between the person he was expected to be and the person he truly was. From the pressures of his youth to the relentless public scrutiny that followed him into adulthood, every step of his life seemed orchestrated by expectations he never fully owned. His long-standing connection with Camilla had cast a shadow over his journey through the monarchy, enduring years of separation, judgment, and whispered criticism. That persistent and complicated bond became one of the most publicly dissected relationships in modern royal history, placing him at the center of a narrative he never asked for, where personal choices were constantly questioned, interpreted, and judged by millions. Over time, this relentless surveillance created an invisible cage around him, where every smile, gesture, and glance became a carefully monitored act, leaving little room for authentic expression. Every moment of hesitation could spark rumors, shrinking the private world he longed for until it nearly vanished. What remained was a life lived entirely in the spotlight, one that had once forced him to hide his true emotions and protect relationships too fragile to withstand public scrutiny. When he finally said, "I hated her," the words did not simply target a single individual. They reflected an entire life shaped by relentless intrusion. This was not hatred born of sudden anger, but of years of pressure accumulating beneath a composed exterior, pressure that turned personal longing into quiet resentment. He harbored bitterness toward the unseen forces that had shadowed him for decades, forces that robbed him of choices and exposed the parts of his life meant to remain private. That resentment had a shape, a shadow, and a history. Though he never named it aloud in that moment, its influence had touched nearly every chapter of his life. Even with those words spoken, the deeper layers of his admission were only beginning to unfold. What then shaped this silent resentment and the unseen shadow that haunted every choice he made? The confession he had whispered did not simply dissipate. It lingered over him like a shadow that refused to fade. Anyone listening closely could sense that these words came from a place far deeper than passing anger. They emerged from wounds carved long before the world realized he was hurting. As his voice fell into silence, the next layer of his truth began to take shape, revealing not just resentment, but a sorrow that had quietly lived within him for years. For Charles, heartbreak did not arrive in a single dramatic moment. It accumulated slowly, piece by piece, until its weight could no longer be concealed. It began with the realization that his personal life had ceased to belong to him, that every choice, every whispered emotion, and every sign of affection or its absence was subject to scrutiny and control. Every aspect of his life became material for public debate. People discussed him as though he were a character in a story, rather than a man struggling to navigate emotions he barely had space to understand. The world often perceived his position as one of privilege, yet it rarely acknowledged the sacrifices it demanded. Among them, the painful truth that even the most private matters could be distorted into spectacle. Charles had always been a man who loved quietly, valuing loyalty and long-standing bonds. But the life he inherited required that those bonds be reshaped, repurposed, or hidden entirely. What should have remained personal became fodder for headlines, documentaries, and whispered judgment. This relentless intrusion slowly eroded him, each moment stripping away the freedom to feel without fear. His heart carried memories of a connection that had endured time, separation, and expectation. Yet every time it resurfaced, it seemed the entire world was standing too close, watching, analyzing, and dissecting details that were never theirs to claim. When certain calls were leaked, intimate conversations that should have remained private, the humiliation cut deeper than he ever admitted. It was more than embarrassment, it was betrayal. The privacy every human being deserves had been stolen, displayed for strangers to dissect. Beside him, the person he shared his life with endured equal, if not greater, scrutiny. Diana's pain became public property, her suffering broadcast in headlines that circled the globe. Every tear, confession, and sign of unhappiness was consumed by the world, and he saw how that relentless exposure created cracks in their lives, cracks that eventually widened beyond repair. His sorrow intertwined with hers, leaving both of them trapped in a story neither could fully control. This was the heartbreak behind his confession. When he finally said, "I hated her," the hatred was not aimed solely at a person, but at the forces that had destroyed the possibility of love existing peacefully in his life. He resented the spotlight that amplified every misstep, the voices that thrived on his failures, the public fracture that made genuine affection feel dangerous, and above all, the way humiliation became inseparable from his heart, forcing him to navigate grief under the gaze of millions. Even as he confronted those emotions, he knew they represented only one layer of his story, for the sorrow he carried had roots that stretched deep into the past. The heartbreak that followed him like a silent companion did not begin with a single event. It grew over years of being molded into the person the world expected while his own desires were pushed aside. As he faced memories long buried beneath duty, the pain drew him toward another truth he had spent a lifetime avoiding. His sorrow was no longer merely about public humiliation or the invasion of privacy, it was the profound, unspoken ache of being bound to a life that never matched the one he truly wanted. At the center of that ache was a woman who had always been there, even when not physically beside him, Camilla. She had existed quietly in his story long before the world attached scandal to her name. Their bond had formed naturally, in a time when he could act on emotion without the crushing weight of headlines. But the moment his path became inseparable from the crown, everything changed. His heart might have known Camilla, but the institution demanded someone entirely different, a bride who fit the image, the tradition, the spotless narrative expected of a future king. It never asked what he felt. It never cared what he longed for. It only demanded that he follow the script. The clash between heart and duty, between desire and expectation, became a wound that never truly healed. Diana, unforgettable for her youth, innocence, and raw vulnerability, was barely emerging from adolescence when her life was thrust into a spotlight far brighter than anything she could have anticipated. The 12-year gap between them represented more than age. It marked a divide in experience, emotional readiness, and understanding the suffocating demands of royal life. She was catapulted into a world built on centuries of rigid rules, while he was expected to shape himself into the perfect partner for a woman chosen not for their compatibility, but for what the monarchy demanded. Through it all, Camilla's presence lingered not as scandal, but as history. She stood as a reminder of what he could never fully have, and as a symbol of the life he believed had been taken from him. The more he tried to conform to the role imposed upon him, the wider the gap grew between the person he was allowed to love and the person he truly loved. Over years of pretense and performance, that distance eventually crystallized into bitterness. When he admitted he had hated her, the meaning of those words shifted into something sharper, more painful. He hated the mismatch that had defined his life. He hated how the crown demanded harmony where none existed. Beneath it all, he hated the impossible position he had been forced into, standing beside someone who deserved genuine love and protection, while his own heart remained tied to someone he could not freely choose. His sorrow was not mere jealousy or regret. It was the crushing awareness that his life had been shaped by forces far larger than himself. And as he recalled the woman who had stayed in his heart despite every attempt to suppress the truth, the emotions welling within him were no longer just sorrow. They were the beginnings of a confession he had avoided for decades, edging him toward the next painful revelation. A lifetime of hidden sorrow and forbidden memories had driven him toward a confession no one expected. When private shadows became public wounds, the grief inside him refused to settle. It rose continually, pushing old memories to the surface. What he carried was no longer simply the pain of choosing between duty and desire, nor the ache of incompatibility that tore two lives apart. It was the crushing weight of betrayal, one that did not stem from a single person, but from a world that fed upon his most intimate moments, that grief sharpened into something colder. The true weight of his confession began to emerge. It came in the most humiliating way possible. A private conversation, one that should have remained between two people who believed they still had something safe to hold onto, was suddenly everywhere. It reverberated through living rooms, dominated newspapers, whispered in classrooms and workplaces, dissected by strangers who felt entitled to every detail of his life. The leaked phone call became more than a scandal, it became a weapon aimed at everything he had tried to protect. For Charles, hearing his own voice replayed by the media was like reopening the same wound repeatedly. It wasn't just the content of the call that cut deep, but what it represented, a total loss of control over his narrative. There was no room for nuance, no space for understanding. The world heard only one version, the wrong version, and labeled him the villain, portraying his heart as reckless and cruel, while ignoring years of silent suffering and unspoken strain that led him there. Wrapped inside that humiliation was Camilla, once a source of comfort and familiarity in a life filled with expectation. She became the symbol of the scandal. She was no longer just the woman he had loved long before the world cared. She embodied everything that had been torn apart. Every headline, cruel comment, and joke deepened the damage, turning his private sorrow into a shared, unbearable entanglement. He hated what her presence had come to represent, not her character or who she was, but the pain and chaos that seemed to follow wherever she touched his life. Through her, he lost his privacy, the little control he had left, and the fractures in his marriage widened beyond repair. Every mention of her name carried echoes of shame, public ridicule, and a story he never wanted to live. This hatred was not simple. It was born from heartbreak, a complex, tangled emotion aimed at the turmoil her presence invoked. Even when he tried to protect her, even when he remembered the warmth of their early bond, he could not escape the truth that her presence had become inseparable from the pain he carried. Her involvement had turned his life into a spectacle. The quiet, private companionship he once treasured had been transformed into a storm sweeping through everything he held dear. And when Diana, with the softness of a wounded heart, publicly admitted that there had been a third person in her marriage, the world immediately took her side. Public sympathy shifted, leaving him more isolated than ever. He felt he had failed someone who deserved better, yet he also felt betrayed by a system that had never allowed him the freedom to choose differently. Everything collided: shame, sorrow, regret, and the painful realization that, in his world, love could be more destructive than comforting. This was the moment that pushed him closer to the confession that weighed so heavily on his chest. The moment he understood that the hatred he spoke of was only the beginning of a deeper truth waiting to be unraveled. The throne he had inherited proved too heavy for a father's heart. What followed the storm of leaked secrets was not relief, but a new, deeper kind of pain, one that struck beneath humiliation, scandal, and the crushing weight of public judgment. It was the ache that emerged when he looked at his children and recognized how much of their innocence had been sacrificed to the chaos surrounding him. The sorrow he had carried in relation to Camilla, something he had once tried to shoulder quietly, now reached into the one place he had hoped would remain untouched: his family. The world often imagined royal children growing up in glittering halls, shielded from the troubles that affect ordinary lives. But for him, even that sanctuary had been pierced by the relentless glare of public scrutiny. For Charles, William, and Harry were never symbols, they were his sons. Two young boys who needed stability, warmth, and a peaceful home, yet whose memories would inevitably be shaped not by gentle childhood moments, but by the tension that thickened every room they entered. Everything he had tried to shield them from slowly seeped into their lives, despite his desperate efforts to hold the pieces together. He had hoped, perhaps naively, that becoming a father might heal some of the existing wounds in his marriage. At one time, he believed that the presence of children could act as a bridge, softening sharp edges, easing strain, and reminding both him and Diana of the family they were meant to build. But instead, the pressure to present a perfect royal family only deepened the cracks. Every family photo became a performance, every outing a test, every smile meticulously measured for the cameras. Beneath the false calm, resentment grew, fueled by the lingering shadow of another woman. Camilla, though absent from the household, was spiritually present in every argument, every misunderstanding, every moment in which Diana felt unseen and unloved. Her name, even unspoken, hovered over the family as a constant reminder of everything broken. And Charles, unable to erase the past or change the expectations imposed upon him, found himself suffocating under the relentless weight of duty, scrutiny, and unresolved heartache. Charles felt an overwhelming guilt. He saw how deeply Diana loved their sons, how fiercely she protected them, and how committed she was to giving them what the crown could not: normal moments, genuine affection, and emotional warmth. Her devotion made his own failures all the more painful, reminding him that the life he could offer would always be shadowed by a past he could never fully escape. In the quiet of the night, when the palace hallways lay empty and the world outside slept, he wrestled with the bitter truth. Camilla's presence had not only disrupted his marriage, but had also denied him the chance to give his children the peaceful, stable home he believed they deserved. He hated the complicated emotions that surged whenever he thought of her, the way her history intertwined with his present, and most of all, the reality that the life he had chosen, or perhaps the life chosen for him, had thrust his children into a story far too heavy for their young shoulders. This hatred was never simple. It was not directed solely at her as a person, but at what her involvement symbolized: the impossibility of creating something whole in a world already fractured, the impossibility of building a peaceful family life when every choice, connection, and misstep was magnified for the world to see. Even as this pain consumed him, he sensed deeper layers yet to be unraveled, older wounds stretching back long before his sons were born, memories that now demanded to be faced. Before Camilla became a duchess, long before grand ceremonies and royal appearances, there existed a tangled map of past lovers, broken promises, and memories that refused to fade. The king, once full of hope for a life of genuine love, found himself confronted by a past that clung relentlessly, casting shadows over every present joy. Camilla's early life unfolded in a world where charm and strategy intertwined. She married Andrew Parker Bowles on July 4, 1973, and the union produced 2 children: Tom, born December 18, 1974, and Laura, born in 1978. Though outwardly respectable, the marriage could not contain her restless personal desires, ultimately ending in divorce in 1995. These dates and names were more than historical markers. They were milestones in a history that refused to let go, reminders of love lost, trust broken, and lives intertwined with her choices. For Charles, the pain was not mere jealousy or rivalry. It was a profound sorrow born from history's persistence. Every smile Camilla offered, every courtly gesture, echoed a past that refused to be buried. The bitterness he harbored was aimed at that enduring presence, a life that seemed to mock his attempts at renewal. Where he longed for fresh beginnings, he instead found constant reminders that some chapters were never meant to be closed. He hated Camilla not only for her present actions, but for the way her very existence, entwined with old flames and unresolved passions, made the world around him unbearably heavy. Every gathering, family event, and fleeting public moment was tainted by the weight of history she carried, making her, in his eyes, a living testament to broken promises and inevitable sorrow. Her influence was subtle yet relentless, coloring even the brightest corners of his life with grief and disillusionment. In moments of solitude, he poured out his heart not in complaint, but in sorrowful reflection, through letters and whispered confessions to those he trusted most. Charles's private reflections, late-night confessions to friends, and whispered admissions all bore witness to a man grappling with a past he could neither rewrite nor escape. He mourned what might have been, what should have been, and what, despite all efforts, never would be. This was not simple bitterness. It was heartbreak shaped by circumstance and compounded by the unyielding truth that history does not bend to desire. Camilla's past, her choices, and the life she carried with her were inescapable, and through it all, he navigated the delicate balance between duty, love, and shadows that refused to relent. The weight of the crown and the confessions within became inescapable on September 8, 2022, when the death of Queen Elizabeth II ended an era and placed the crown squarely upon Charles's head. With the crown came Camilla's ascent as queen consort, a reality decades in the making. Though their engagement and eventual marriage in 2005 had long been public knowledge, no ceremony or accolade could soften the private wounds he carried. His bitterness had grown not only from public judgment, but from a life shaped by choices that were never fully his. In his view, Camilla was not merely a woman he had once loved or a companion re-entering his life. She was a living symbol of a past that refused to fade, a persistent reminder of roads taken and denied, compelling him into compromises that chipped away at his very soul. Every encounter, every acknowledgement of her role forced him to confront the parts of himself he had tried and failed to protect. In private confessions to trusted friends, he revealed the exhaustion, heartbreak, and relentless ache of living a life pre-written by circumstance and expectation. He traced the path of his resentment to moments never fully his own. Cycles of public scrutiny, judgments cast by history, and the relentless intrusion of a life intertwined with Camilla's, which made the world around him feel darker and more constrained. His hatred, he admitted quietly, was not arbitrary. It was a distilled reaction to a reality he had never asked for yet could not escape. Camilla embodied the persistence of history, the impossibility of a life lived entirely on his own terms. Every gesture, smile, and carefully measured word she offered carried echoes of old entanglements, transforming joy into unease and hope into restraint. Did I end this emotional crucible? Charles confronted the final truth behind decades of bitterness. Camilla was simultaneously many things: a person, a past, and a role demanding impossible navigation. She embodied all the forces shaping his resentment, and in naming her, he revealed the full complexity of love, duty, and loss. In his heart, he admitted, without dramatization or flourish, the depth of his emotion. I hated her. Within that simple phrase lay the weight of a lifetime: sorrow, heartbreak, and the relentless tension between what was chosen and what was endured. The question remains: what truly drove the king to confess his deepest pain and hatred? Love lost, duty betrayed, or history's relentless shadow?